And there we go. We are now recording. Well, thank you, everyone. Today, this afternoon, tonight, we're going to be going over kind of an overview of what is Mathshare, what are the goals for it, how to use it, so how to create a problem set, how to add in the problems, customize it for your students, and then assigning it out, and then viewing your students' work. And then also kind of like where we're going with that, and then have kind of like a Q&A at the end of it. This is something that we are actively developing. So we're always looking for classrooms to work with as we're developing new features and getting feedback from them. For myself, my name's Matt. I taught science for 12 years. I live in Minnesota. So I taught at a number of charter schools here in the Twin Cities. And most recently, I was at a charter school that was all Somali East African immigrant students, which was a really interesting change for me. That was the first school that I taught that wasn't in the suburbs. I'd been working with at-risk teens before that. And so it's been really interesting because my students have always, majority of them haven't had IEPs. They didn't have any physical disabilities, but they all struggled in school. So all of the at-risk teens I was working with all struggled within school, and that's why they were now at my school. At the charter school with all of my immigrant students, they were able to do a lot of the work just fine, but English was their second language. And so sometimes they would struggle with the handwriting, or they would struggle with some of the reading and just that comprehension of the difference between like reading it and then being able to comprehend what it is that you're reading. And so there were a number of different things that I kind of ran into of where, technology was really helping my students be successful, but they were struggling in different ways. And so I tried to really implement a lot of technology and different things. And it was 3D printing learning aids that first brought me to Benetech anyways, about 5 years ago, as a way of really engaging my students by having that tactile hands-on learning. And we're continuing that work with Mathshare too, one of my other projects. And then the other side though too of so our goal with Mathshare is to not be so Mathshare is never going to be a curriculum delivery or development tool. Our goal with Mathshare is for it to be an accessible math solution and solving tool for students so that they can, regardless of their disability or whether they have no disability whatsoever, giving students an even playing field so that they can work through a math problem and demonstrate their learning of a concept and kind of go through that trial and error aspect, and then also being able to share and communicate their solutions and their work with their classmates. So, if a student is using a screen reader and they're blind or low vision, they can still fully participate and interact with students in a mainstream classroom with Mathshare because, your other students then are going to be working through their math problem within Mathshare. And then that student using a screen reader can then also be able to have that information read out to them in a way that makes sense to a screen reader user. And then vice versa, that student with the using the screen reader is going to be able to go through, show all of their work, explain why they did those steps, and all of their their sighted classmates can then look at that and then be able to understand what that student did. And so it really kind of evens that playing field so that everybody is able to go through these things. And our goal is to have Mathshare as something that will always be a standalone tool that's free to everybody, but also having it something that is integrated into as many different edtech tools as we can and assessment tools. I was shocked when I started working on Mathshare to discover that majority of math tools, digital math tools, are not accessible whatsoever to screen readers. And I could not believe that, right? We're in 2019 and I was shocked by it. And so that's really where, by bringing Mathshare into it, we're really hoping to add in all of this accessibility. And in doing so, we're also going to be delivering a more inclusive classroom. And then, it's not, for me, it's not just this altruistic, I want to make the world a better place. It's also some selfish things. So I've got 2 kids. And my 9-year-old my 9-year-old has cerebral palsy. She's nonverbal uses a walker for getting around, is extremely social, loves to interact with other kids. She's able to communicate a lot, just anyways, non-verbally, with her classmates. And so having, and so being able to write out math in a very legible way for her classmates, especially as she gets older, I think will be something that'll be difficult. So having a math tool in which she can do these things, because she's able to type pretty well. She's in third grade, so she's like learning it right now. But she has that fine motor abilities to do that. So with Mathshare being something that's going to help her actually be able to interact in the same way with her classmates is going to be fantastic. So we already got a question here of, will you talk about Gen Ed math working assignments into Mathshare? Yes. So I'll kind of go through some of those things here. So I've already been lecturing a lot, which is not best practice. And I am going to go ahead and open up Mathshare and start going through an example here. All right, so now I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we start off on the dashboard. Oh, I just got a message, looks from a very helpful person named Matt. So I'm assuming pretty much everybody has already seen this because you've already signed up. So I'm going to just go ahead and sign in. You don't have to sign in. And I always like to emphasize this because in the age of data privacy and people just not wanting to sign in, that's fine. You can continue and use everything within Mathshare without signing in. The only thing is that your work will be saved, but unless if you save the URL of your work, you'll never find it again. So by signing in, then all of your information is then connected with your account, and it all shows up here in your dashboard. Otherwise, you just need to make sure that you save the URL of individual problem sets to then come back to it, and telling your students that too. So we're going to go ahead and just start off by selecting new problem set. I should say, well, yeah, we'll come back to that. So I'm going to select new problem set. So this first window that opens up, and I'm going to kind of emphasize a lot of the different types of feedback we've already received from students. We've been working on Mathshare for about 1.5 years now, and we've been doing a lot of student testing and feedback as we've been developing it. And one of the first things was about not having all of these math operators immediately shown to students, because it can be extremely overwhelming, and then also color coding them. So we've broken them up into these 4 different palettes of edit, operators, notations, and geometry. For this one, we're not going to need geometry, so I'm going to unselect it, and then I will select next. This is our problem set screen. I want to rename our problem set, so it's going to be something that'll make sense. So I'm just going to call this Thursdays afternoon webinar, and I'll select save. With the more options ellipses right next to the title, this gives you some options of being able to duplicate the problem set, sharing it out on Twitter, which please do. Social media is going to be one of our big areas of just simply spreading the word. And then also being able to view your problem set as a student so you can kind of experience it that way as well. So I'm going to now select add new problem. And this window that pops up is now where we can add in the equation and then the title or kind of the instructions for that problem. And then we have our math editor here. Now the geometry one shows up for me as a teacher when we're creating in this problems, but it won't show up for students. So this first I'm just gonna put in is gonna be like 8x plus 10 is equal to 3. And I'm going to then save, so I tabbed over, I'm gonna say solve for x. And now I'm going to select add problem. So we've now added that up there. This next one, what I'm going to do is, I made a video about this yesterday, but I kind of like this of adding in empty spots. So I'm going to say of like 8 plus, and now I'm going to select this parentheses operator and then use my arrow over a few times and then is equal to 10. And so this is kind of a neat one because this is like a fill in the blank problem for students. So if your students aren't using, so if you're not using variables like X, so more elementary, this is a really easy way to put in that. And going back to the question of how can you use this in general ed, what's nice is that because a lot of times you want your students to show your work. So when I taught physics and I taught chemistry, so much of it, like I'd always tell my students, I don't really care that much if you got the right answer or not. I would always call them like fat finger errors, of where it's like you're typing it out on the calculator and then you hit the wrong button and then you get the wrong answer. And it's silly to give students no work or no credit for that, because it's really about the process. Did they understand the process? Did they work through that problem and identify what was important? That's what really mattered. And that's where Mathshare is a really nice way to help students structure these things, because a lot of students still struggle with organizing their math into their notebooks. And I've seen so many students where they make a mistake and then they're just like, so then they erase everything, or they just rip up the paper and they start again. And there's so much lost work on that. Whereas with Mathshare, we actually save all of those steps, even if they like undo work. That'll be something we'll release later on, so you can actually do kind of like a little time machine and go back and see the whole process. But it's nice to be able to just kind of like undo and change, modify your steps if you made a mistake. So beauty of computers is being able to just undo work. So here I'm just going to say fill in the blank, and I'm going to add this problem. All right, so the third one I'm going to add in is going to be a word problem here. So I'm going to say we'll just say like 5x plus 9y is equal to 100. Let's just say that. All right. Now over here, I'm going to use the dictate tool. This is available to students too. This math editor is the same for students and teachers. And I'm just going to say a train is traveling at 4 miles per hour and the second train is traveling at 9 miles per hour. How long will it take them to go 100 miles? And now it's going to add that in. So this is going to be our word problem. Now, I also want to add in a sketch because of that. So I'm going to use the line tool. Now, this sketch pad that we put in, there's a lot in terms of accessibility that we have plans for this sketch pad. We've looked at the different geometry drawing tools that like Desmos and GeoGebra have. We've kind of seen that those aren't really accessible with screen readers and keyboard access. Their graphing tools are amazing with the sonification and everything. Those are fantastic for accessibility, but the drawing tools and geometry and digital manipulatives are something that there's really something missing still in all the tools, and that's something we're really exploring. But for right now, this is our first one, and we got this request from a student to add in a sketch pad because they wanted to be able to kind of like put out blocks. That really helped them organize things in their mind by being able to have these blocks. That's what they like to do on paper, and they just wanted to be able to do that in a digital way that was going to save along with their work. So you can kind of, that's why we added this in, but this is the first version. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw in like my train, and it's going this direction, and then another train, it's going this direction. You can import images as well. So with this little folder icon, you can then load in images and you can change the color and the line width and things like that. And now I'm going to add this problem and I'm going to select done. So we have our 3 problems. They're automatically numbered 1, 2, and 3. If I wanted to change them, you can click and drag and move these problems around and it'll automatically renumber them. The problem with the drawing in there has this little picture icon on there. If you select that in another tab, the image will open. And then each problem has a little more options menu item of where you can either edit the problem, where it will then open up, you can edit it. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Whoops. Okay, well, that was bad. That was a fail. I should not have done that one. All right, we're just gonna leave that for right now. Or you can remove the problem. So I screwed up now, I'm just gonna remove it. Okay, yes, I want to remove that problem. There we go. All right, now we got our problem set done. We're ready to assign this thing out because the way that Mathshare works is that we have all of our problems in a set. Later on, we are going to add the ability so students can just come into Mathshare and create a problem right away and get going to solve it on their own within Mathshare. So the 3 ways you can assign things out is we have Google Classroom built in and Microsoft Teams built in. Again, as a teacher, I live and died by Google integration because we use Chromebooks and it made life beautiful and easy. So if you select Google Classroom, another window pops open. I'm not sure if you can see it. And then they can select which class they want to assign it to and those things. Same thing with Microsoft Teams. For this one, what we're going to do though is I'm going to do share permalink. And this link, what it's going to do is when students open up that link, it will make a copy of that, and then they can start working through it. And so I'm just going to select copy, and in a new tab, I will paste this one in. So I'm going to go ahead and put this also into our chat so you guys can try this out as well. And I'm just going to, so I see we got a couple more comments here. This is fantastic. So your teacher using a screen reader, is this part of the program accessible for someone without vision? Yes. So all portions of Mathshare is accessible for people that are using screen readers. We've been working, one of our developers that we're working with is also blind, and so he's been using a screen reader as we've been going through and developing these things and giving us a lot of input as well as we're developing new features. If you ever run into a problem, please don't hesitate simply to email me. You can respond to any of the emails that you receive from Mathshare. Those will come directly to me, so that we can kind of like improve and modify these things, because it's definitely Mathshare and working through math it can be a complex thing. And so we want to make sure that this process is as intuitive and streamlined as possible. All right, can problems be presented in a vertical layout? They cannot at this time. That is something we've had some requests, and we're exploring how to do that. Things like long division, and definitely because students first learn how to do that, where they're kind of stacking the numbers if they're adding or subtracting or multiplying them. And so we want to replicate that experience for students when they're switching over to digital. So we are exploring it. It's not possible at this time. Is it possible to import problems from another platform? That again is not possible yet, but is something that we're looking at, because that is definitely going to be something that will, we want to lower the barriers for teachers. So let us know how you'd want to import these things, like if it's coming from a specific tool, or if it's like a PDF or a Word document, you just want to be able to import that and put in those math problems. I should mention that copying and pasting text from other systems works out great. You can even paste in LaTeX code, and it'll convert it into the math equations. That works out well. So if you open up that link that I put into the chat, you'll then see this is what students will now see. So we're going to work through this first one of solve for x. And what I need to do first is I need to move 10 to both sides. So I'm going to say minus 10 and minus 10. So there's some really neat things here that we can do within Mathshare. Of one is calculate. So if I highlight this 3 minus 10, I can have Mathshare just calculate this for me, right? Like I know how to do this already. I'll just do this. And what's neat is when that happens, it crosses out that previous work and then puts in the answer. Now, this other one, we can also do this on our own too. So these two tools, this cross out and replace, are tools that I instantly was like, yes, when I first saw Mathshare as a science teacher, because, right, that's what you always do in paper is like, I always tell my students to cross it out. You don't want to erase things, we always cross it out. I also went to school as a chemist, and I worked as a chemist for a number of years, and it was like, right, you never erase or scribble all things. You always put one line through so you can always see it still. So I always tell my students that, because you want to know what was there. So with this cross out and replace, I can now type in, that's going to be 0. So over here in my description, I'm just going to say move, subtract, or just move 10 to the other side. And so Michelle just asked, does it have text-to-speech built in? It does not have text-to-speech built in right now. If students are using any text-to-speech tools within Chrome, there's a number of extensions or a screen reader. Those will work great with Mathshare. They can read out the math just fine. We are looking at adding that in later on for students that aren't used to using those tools. So they can just click a button and it will read out the equation or read out certain explanations for the students. We are kind of exploring that. So I'm now going to go ahead and add the step. And this is another really neat thing. So in step 2, we can see all those crossouts, and then Mathshare went and it cleaned it up. So it says clean up right there as a little comment. And we've got that work. So I don't really need 0, so I'm going to delete that one. And now what I'm going to do is I've got my cursor next to 8x, and I'm going to hit slash. So it automatically now sets it up as divide. I can do 8. You can also highlight it and then select the fraction button. And you can see when you move the mouse over each of the different buttons in our operator palettes, you can see the keyboard combinations that are available for those. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one. and type in 8. So I'm going to say now I'm going to use the dictate tool of divide by 8. Well, not 5 divided by 8. Oh, geez. Divide both sides by 8. There we go. And we've got that. I'm going to just go ahead and add in this step. And now I'm going to calculate that. And this one simplifies out to x. I'm going to say done, add my step, and there we go. So I'm now going to click on finish. This will save my work, and it's going to send me back to all of our problems here. So I finished number 1, and then we can go on to number 2. When students select that, they can see the full description up here of what they need to do. They've got the problem, and then they also have this little image icon, so they can select that and then view the image that you added in there. Now, I won't work through this whole problem. I'm just going to go back to all problems and I'll show you a couple different things. Now, I got 2 different questions here, or got another question here. Do you have to use the keyboard combinations, or will tapping the buttons accomplish the actions? Tapping the buttons will also accomplish the actions. In this morning's webinar, someone even requested to have a way of making those buttons larger for if you're using a tablet, and I think that's a fantastic idea. And that kind of gets me into some of the personalization settings that I want to highlight right now that we've added in. So up here in the upper right, we've got 2 different options of this help menu. So we've got tutorial, accessibility, which will take you to a Google Doc that describes some of the accessibility, our help center, which we're always adding to, and then our feedback form. And then if you click on your user icon, we just added in this personalization feature. And so when you open that up, you can then change the font. Right now, it doesn't change the font though, because we haven't added in the fonts yet, but it will. You can change the line height, so you can increase that, and you can change the letter spacing, and then I can click on save. And I was going to go through, it didn't seem like it changed that. We'll take a look at that. And we'll change those things. Now, one of the things we don't have in there is the ability to change the text size. And we were going to, but one of the developers that we're working with, he had the really good point of, if students want to have the text larger on the screen, they're probably using the built-in browser's capability of doing that. And so so on my Mac, I can press Command and plus to increase the text size on my screen. And so we wanted to kind of stick with this so that Mathshare isn't trying to replace or overwrite whatever it is those settings are the student had. We want to work with those settings that they have already in there. So that's why we don't have the changing text or text size as one of those personalization settings, so that students can do that. And you can see the buttons increase as they're going along. Now, you can also see this kind of spread across the screen. Mathshare is not compatible with mobile devices yet. It does work on iPads in portrait view, but that is something that we are working on. We are going to be launching this school year is kind of an update so that Mathshare is completely responsive to different screen sizes, including then on phones. And so that will kind of resolve some of these issues that you can really expand it. And then being able to add in like that, like large buttons capability too in the personalization settings. So I'm going to go back to my problems here, and I'm all done. I'm ready to turn it in. Students can turn in their assignments directly through Google Classroom and Teams if that's how you assigned it. But if they didn't, what they can do is they can then select the share permalink, copy that link. Now you'll see within this link, it has this spot of review instead of solve. And what that does, I'm going to open this in a new tab here. This is what students would send back to you. Now, a couple of different things I want to point out for this. One, the student's name is not on here. You can see this as a feature or something missing. No data privacy or having to worry about students' names being transferred, so that is great. But really, again, that goes with, we don't want Mathshare to replace an LMS or different kind of teaching tools. We're envisioning Mathshare to work with those things. So if you're using Google Classroom, the student's name is attached to their assignment, so you know that this is whose assignment this is when you've opened it up. Same thing if you're emailing it, if students are emailing their work to you, and those kinds of different things. So we're trying to really stay focused on the accessibility experience for helping students work through those problems. But so now as a teacher, if I open up that problem, I can now see here's the student's work. I do not have the math editor on the screen. We can't change or edit anything. And this is a really good way for students also to be able to share their work with classmates too. So when we're talking about being in class and working with peers and kind of sharing their solutions, this is a really great way of where then they could, email or share their link to their finished problem set, and then everyone else can kind of see their work, and they're not like going through and editing or changing anything. So it's a really fantastic way. So we just kind of stay focused on that. And let's see, I'm trying to think of if there was anything that we missed. Oh, so I'm just going to go back to the dashboard here. With every single problem set, there is the ability to the more options of being able to duplicate and share those problem sets. We're going to be adding in the ability to delete them. We have some pre-made problem sets down here, and I'm also going to be releasing a Google form and spreadsheet where then educators can share their problem sets they've created with other people. And many of you have already found this little chat button down here. If you click on that, this will open up an instant message to us. So there's a team of us that are working on Mathshare, and you can also search directly into the Help Center and kind of find different things in there. So I see we got a couple more questions, and that is great. So let's see here. All right. So a question of, do you have to use, oh, nope. Or do you have to use keyboard combinations, or will tapping the buttons accomplish that? Is it working with Canvas yet? It is with the links. We are working on an LTI integration. That is something that we plan on releasing by the end of December. So we'll have the deeper integration with Canvas by the end of December, but for right now, you can do the links. In regard to student data privacy, you do not have to register the student and their qualifying exceptionality in order to use Mathshare. No, you don't. So even though, yes, right, we're part of Benetech, just like Bookshare, but unlike Bookshare, you do not have to have any kind of qualifying disability or anything to use Mathshare. We don't collect any of that information, and students can fully use Mathshare without ever signing in or entering in their name or anything like that. Our data privacy policy is, right now we're working under the one that Bookshare has, which Bookshare does kind of have more things beyond what we need for Mathshare. We collect far less information about students in Mathshare, but right now we're working under Bookshare's privacy policy. But yeah, so students do not have to have any disabilities whatsoever. And our goal as we're kind of expanding out Mathshare is, if you're working with different math tools or LMS tools and their math accessibility is not all that great, let them know about Mathshare. Mathshare is an open source tool, and we are looking for as many partners as possible to integrate Mathshare into, so that their products will then be accessible. Because for a lot of the tools, they're mostly accessible except for when it comes to the math, and that's where things really fall apart. And so by bringing in Mathshare as one of the tools, that's really kind of our big hope, is that, then we're going to be helping all these other edtech companies that have got great products, they're not accessible, be able to make them accessible. And then you can use the same tool with all of your students, which again is the goal. And that again is my that's my more selfish motivation for Mathshare of having everything that they're doing in the mainstream classroom being fully accessible for my daughter and my son too. He doesn't have any disabilities, but I don't know, maybe he's gonna have horrible handwriting. I've got horrible handwriting, so this would probably help him out too. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.